Welcome. Really excited to have everyone joining us here tonight on the J&J Political Show. We have a fantastic show for y'all. We are going to discuss the 2024 candidates for president. That is Republicans and Democrats. And yeah, really excited to get into the pros and cons of each candidate. And I know Jose is excited as well.
Yeah, that's right, Joseph. We have a lot of candidates, and we're gonna start right off the bat with Republican candidates. There's several of them who have already, put their name in the hat, and we're gonna start with, there's so many of them. Right? We didn't know how to start, so we're just gonna go straight order in the way that they filed to run for office. So here's the graphic for the Republican side. And as you can see, that's a busy field. I mean, how many candidates is it? I can't. Let me see. Let's count this really quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Forget about it. Let's go to the first candidate. It's too many, and this is the thing. There's more in the mix. There's some that are considering jumping in the race still in this very day. But look, let's start with Donald Trump. We're going to talk about the pros and the cons of these candidates, starting with number 45.
Yeah, so President Trump declared on November 15th, the pros for President Trump is that he was already president. That is a pro just because, we know the agenda that he already put forth. So we have an idea already of what he's done, what he's accomplished. On the other hand, one of the negatives is that he's already been president. We already know, what we got with him. There was a lot of things that he did great. There was a lot of things that I personally disagree with. But, there's also the factor of his age, being that he's 77. Republicans, we've been harping with good reason on the age of Joe Biden. But Donald Trump is not far behind him in the age category. So, pros are that he was already president. Negative is that he was already president. He's older, so that mix. Obviously, he's been leading the field in the polls for the primaries, but it's been a mixed bag of results against Joe Biden so far.
Hey, Joseph, and you know what? There's 13 Republicans, right, in the field, I think, and one of the pros that I think that President Trump would bring to the table is that since he's already been president, if he gets elected, that's it. He's gonna focus on the term, versus any of the other candidates would have to consider, okay, I want to make sure I get reelected. So Trump cannot get reelected. So I think that's one of the things that would be good for him.
I think that's a positive and a negative, just because on the same hand, typically, in their second term, they're considered lame duck presidents. Or on the other hand, there was stuff that Trump tried doing as president previously that he had to be talked down about. So I don't know if that would make a difference to where now he doesn't have to worry about his poll numbers and stuff like that, so he can just push through certain things that he wanted to get done that others might not have agreed with. So pros and cons to that, I think.
So like a lot of candidates, they get asked, are you ready to be president on day one, right? And he's been president, so he's got that experience. So
right.
There's not going to be a learning curve. However,
right.
Let's go to Nikki Haley, right? She was a governor, right? So would she have a learning curve, right? She's had a administration, so I think that would be some of her pros. And I can think of some of the cons too. If you remember that over in South Carolina. Was it a flag or a statue they removed? I keep forgetting what it was.
It was the statue.
Yep.
It was a statue. Yeah, she was pro removing the Confederate statues.
Yep. And she seems as a leader, right? She was the ambassador to the United Nations, and you arguably you could say that she represented us well. I feel that in our government there's a lot of knee jerk reactions. Listening to the mob, these fever pitches, and I think if she would have come in as governor on day one and say, you know what, this wasn't a campaign issue, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the statue for this reason, whatever, right? That's not what happened. She removed it after there was pressure to remove it, and I that's one of the things I cannot stand politicians doing. Just being victims to that pressure. That's not what we need. We need leaders.
Yeah, I will say two positives that I think that she has is, you mentioned being the former ambassador to the United Nations. Obviously, she can come in and say she had some foreign policy experience. And another thing is, out of the announcements that I watched, the video announcements that I watched, I think she had the best announcement video. I know that's typically not a big deal, but when you have so many candidates in this field, you need something that's going to stand out, and I think her announcement video stood out above the rest. So that's a good way for her to get some attention.
That's right. Let's keep going. Someone who's been getting attention, good or bad, it's Vivek Ramaswamy. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So he and I actually, his team on Twitter, got into a little back and forth. I think the pros for him, he says a lot of great things. A lot of things that typically I would agree with. A lot against the transgendered stuff and pushing that on children. So I think that's a pro. A couple cons. One, he was the lead in Ohio for locking down and masking up. He's relatively unknown and has seemed to come out of nowhere, basically. I've never heard of him before until he declared he was running for president. And then the third thing is that his college tuition was actually paid. He had a scholarship through George Soros's brother. So I think those are the cons, and that was actually a thing that his team and I got into a little back and forth about on. But he does say a lot of really good things. Oh, one other negative, in my opinion, there might be some in the base that agrees with this, but right here it says that he wants to increase the voting age to 25. I don't think that is a good idea whatsoever. I don't think that lowering the age to vote is a good idea, but I don't think raising the age to vote is good as well. I think this is going to drive voters away from us.
Yeah, you're right, and I hate to bring up identity politics, but I don't think his name's going to help him a lot in a general election. Unfortunately, but he is self-funded, and another candidate who's self-funded is Perry Johnson.
Perry Johnson is an interesting guy. I think he's the one with the penny plan or 2 cents plan. That's what it is.
Yes.
The 2 cents plan. So, that's an interesting sort of plan. But again, he's one of those candidates that is unknown. He's 75, so he's on the upper in the upper age bracket. But he said a lot of good things. But in my opinion, he just comes off really awkward. I've seen some videos of him where he was like yelling at the top of his lungs during a speech. Came off really, really odd. So I don't know how well that he would play, not just in the primary, but in the general. I don't know how well he would come across to voters.
Hey, by the way, I mentioned to you, Joseph, before we started the show that this is from NBC News. This is their website, and these are the graphics. And these are very unflattering pictures of these candidates. It seems like they gave the job to an intern or something. No offense to all the interns out there. I was an intern once. But these are very unflattering, pictures of these candidates. Larry Elder, he just ran recently, right, in California for governor. Didn't win that
Mm,
election, but was unsurprising, right? In a liberal, red, almost socialist California, how is it that
mm,
a Republican would win, right? And Larry Elder, he's a conservative radio host, so he's got some name recognition. I just don't think
mm.
he's ready. He's a presidential. He's going to win the primary, right? So,
Yeah.
so I think some of these candidates, a lot of them actually, are probably looking for a job in an administration, if not a VP, but something in the administration.
Yeah,
Cabinet.
and like you said, Larry, he has some more name recognition than a lot of these other folks that are running, being a conservative radio host, and then he ran for governor of California. So, uh, you know, that helps him a little bit, but from the polls that I've seen, it's not moving the needle a whole lot. It could just be the fact that the field is so bogged down with so many candidates. It's really hard. If you're not Trump or DeSantis, it's really hard to get your name in front of people, unless you're spending a lot of money.
Yeah, we have this governor from Arkansas. Um,
Mm,
there's been a lot of famous governors from Arkansas, right? Clinton,
mm.
Mike Huckabee, Sarah Huckabee. I don't think Asa Hutchinson's one of them.
No, to be honest, this is another one that I barely heard of until he declared that he was running for president. From what I'm aware of him, he's a bit more of an establishment sort of figure. So I don't think that really helps him with the base. And yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of candidates that will put up a good fight against Joe Biden, but a lot of these candidates, I just don't see them. When you think about the general election and the presidential debates and stuff, there's certain candidates that you can picture up there against Joe Biden or another Democrat, and Asa Hutchinson just doesn't fit that.
Yeah, absolutely not. What about Tim Scott? He did. He had some media appearances lately, right? And The View kind of destroyed them in their own home turf.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Tim Scott had some really good pros to him. He was a decent senator. There was some stuff I disagreed with, but I think he has a lot of good ideas. He's a little bit on the younger side. Uh, you know, he comes from Charleston, but again, I'm pretty sure he's the first black um, senator from South Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. So he has that, and as you pointed out, he went on to the View recently and absolutely obliterated them. So he does a really good job. He's not being afraid to take on these liberal viewpoints and these pundits, and he does a fantastic job, absolutely destroying them.
And Tim Scott, I think he's one of those candidates that if he does not win the primary, he could be considered for VP. Some of these other
Oh
candidates,
yeah,
I don't see it happening. Now,
yeah.
look at
I think Tim Scott, Nikki Haley are two that are probably going to be considered for vice president, depending on who wins the primary.
yep, and we can absolutely say that if Donald Trump does not win the primary, I doubt that anyone would consider him for vice president.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't see that happening.
Um, the next one's Ron DeSantis, and again, look at this underwhelming picture of Ron DeSantis. I mean, really, what?
Yeah.
I need to know who got these pictures. Over at NBC. This is just we should send him some profile pics of these candidates. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
What do you think about DeSantis?
Well, he's my pick. In my opinion, he is the most conservative of all these candidates. He's done a great job here in the free state of Florida. He's done a lot of positives here. Really strong on abortion. And being pro-life and signing these restrictions into law. Really, really good guns. He's really cracked down on these drag shows and everything going on in the schools and all that stuff. What the cons if you call them that, is one, there's a lot of people in the Trump base that are upset with him for running for president now instead of waiting for 2028. They're, to me, I don't agree with it, but that is an issue there for him to connect with the base. And then another con that I think is there's there's a lot of people that say he comes off as introverted, and he is. I mean, he is. The stories that you hear from his time in Congress and in the governor's mansion, he's a pretty introverted person, and it's really tough to run for president when you're that introverted. So I think they have to do a better job at I don't want to say fixing that, but to an extent fixing that issue, make him come across a little bit more personable.
Yeah, and I think especially here in Florida, I think well, actually, there's two cons that I guess you could say with DeSantis. He's our governor here. I think that there's some Floridians who feel that because he just ran for governor, that he should complete his term instead of running for president. And I understand there's people who are not in Florida who are like, wait a minute, we need Ron DeSantis, whatever, in Nevada, in Illinois as president to help their state, right? So there's that back and forth between Floridians and people who are not from Florida. Now, I'll tell you, like I've been surprised because I work at Disney, and this whole thing with Disney, there's some really hardcore conservatives, and obviously people will always be concerned about their own jobs, right, and their income and whatnot. So I know that there's some people who are concerned about that issue. I'm not. I want the governor to hold everyone in the state accountable. Whether it be a business, individuals, the law applies to everyone, and no one's above the law. And I think the people of Florida are the ones who should be saying how the state should be run, and not any corporation.
Right.
Who's next? Let's see. Oh, went the other way. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping here.
Yeah, Mike. Chris Christie's next.
Okay, hold on. So, what are the pros for Christie?
So I think there's a couple pros for Christie. One, he was a former prosecutor, so he has a lot of good experience holding people accountable. He was the two-term governor of the state of New Jersey, which is a blue state for the most part. And then the third is that he is a really good debater. He's a really effective debater. So much so that he was the debate prep coach for Donald Trump in both 2016 and 2020. And you say what you want about 2020, but 2016, I don't think that Donald Trump lost a single debate against Hillary Clinton. So, Christie has that behind him, and I think that is probably his strongest pro.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think as far as negatives is like, even though he was exonerated from that whole Bridgegate scandal, I think that kind of still lingers over his head. People remember him for that, and then also he's been, I guess, a contributor, I guess you could say, for CNN. So when the liberals are paying you, you gotta be just wary of that. We have Mike Pence. What do you think are his pros?
Yeah, so the pros for Mike Pence is obviously he was vice president. That he can come in. I think it's the same thing with Trump, where he could say, "Well, I wasn't president, but I was directly below the president. I was his right hand man for his term in office. So I got to see the ins and outs of the president and the office of the president. So I think that's a really strong pro for him. I think in Iowa, the fact that he's an evangelical Christian really plays up pretty well. He's really strong on life. So I think those are his big pros in terms of the primary. For the general, I think it's sort of the same thing. If you put him against Joe Biden, I think he comes across as obviously the more sane and rational guy. So
Yeah, I think you mentioned he was a good debater. Is that what you said?
yeah, I mean Mike Pence is a fantastic debater as well.
Yep, yep. So, question for you: do you think that, let's say he does not win the primary, would any of the other people consider him as a VP?
See, it's tough because obviously I don't think Trump's going to consider him. And I don't think that it would be wise for a DeSantis to consider him. Um, and honestly, I don't see anyone else winning the primary, but maybe a Nikki Haley or Tim Scott. If they somehow pull it off, they could pull him in um, as vice president and sort of shore up like anyone that has any concerns about like experience in the White House and stuff. But it's a really long shot.
Well, next up is Doug Burgum from North Dakota. He was a two-term governor. Um, I'm I don't I don't know that he's got name recognition
Yeah,
besides North Dakota.
yeah. I don't think he has a shot in hell.
And, and, and by the way, again, this is probably the worst picture. Look at him. He's holding a coffee. Like, where did they get these pictures from?
Yeah. My guess is that somebody at NBC actually took these pictures, and because they took them, they don't have to worry about like any copyright issues or anything like that, or
But
like
but he was a
user
governor.
rights.
They could get his official picture from North Dakota when he was a governor.
Yeah,
And they probably have it. NBC probably has that.
yeah, they probably do. I mean, I don't know. I mean, NBC, I guess, is not known for their professionalism. I guess that's the
Yeah.
best that I could say.
Now, Francis Suarez, he's the mayor of Miami, and
Mm.
it's interesting because I forget I forget which congressman it was, but there's a South Florida congressman who was also mayor of Miami, but he made a distinction that Francis Suarez is the mayor of the Miami city, which is basically like the downtown area, and not
Yeah.
Miami-Dade County, which is a larger geographical area. So he's mayor of a small town city. I know he made a gaffe. Was that today?
That was yesterday. But yeah, it was a really bad gap. I mean, one, I don't think he had a shot to begin with. He voted for Hillary Clinton. He voted for Barack Obama. He voted for Andrew Gillum, and he voted for Joe Biden. So I don't know how you're going to run as a Republican for president. Voting for those candidates. And then on top of that, he's only the mayor of Miami. Not exactly the experience that you're looking for president. And then the gaffe that you're mentioning, he was on the Hewitt show talking about China, and they asked him, and I probably gonna butcher the name, and now it's gonna be a gaffe on my end, but it's the your I can't pronounce the name. It's the Uruguay.
Uyghurs, the Uyghurs.
Yes. Um, he was asked about that, and he said he had no idea what that was, and so then he came out on Twitter and said that he misheard what he said. I don't buy that whatsoever, because if you read the transcript, it's pretty clear that he heard what he said. But yeah, so his chances were dead before he even jumped in the race.
Yep. Well, let's keep going. And another thing that's gonna hurt that guy is that he's what, the third candidate from Florida.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Right. Yep. So I mean, Florida voters are gonna
Yeah.
be dividing their vote. Yeah, they're not gonna be picking Francis Suarez outside of Miami,
No.
and even in Miami, I doubt they'll pick him.
Yeah, I don't think that there's some conspiracy that thinks that he's possibly running to try to pull away some Hispanic voters away from DeSantis in the primary if he's still in it by then, which I don't think that Suarez will be still in it. But it was an interesting thing that I saw. I don't know, it's a theory. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt, but I just don't understand why he would run. And my personal opinion, I don't want to get too much to tangent, but my personal opinion is that he's actually running for president to get more name recognition for 2026 because I think he's actually going to run for governor. And I think that's more of his plan than actually making a serious run for president. But
yeah, I actually think a lot of these folks who are in the race know they have no shot of winning the presidential, and they are in it to actually eventually drop out and endorse someone else, so they can get a cabinet position or whatever. So, Will Hurd, gentleman, 45 years of age. He's a retired CIA officer, former congressman from Texas. I don't know much about him. I'm not sure if you know who he is.
No, I don't know much about him either. I've heard his name a few times before this. But I don't want to touch on this real quick. I don't know if it's the picture that NBC used, but when you pulled up his picture, I thought he was like at least 55. I'm shocked that he's only 45 years old. He looks much older to me in that picture. But yeah, he's another one that doesn't really have a whole lot of name recognition. And it's another one that it's like, why are you running? What is the point here?
Absolutely. Let's go to the Democrats.
Oh, we're finally done with the Republicans?
Yes, finally done. So Joe Biden. Well, guess what? He's the incumbent, right? So-called incumbent. He's in the White House. The Democratic Party is definitely looking to protect him by not having debates for Joe Biden and his opponents. That is the strongest positive that he has right now. He's part of the establishment, right? So he's in.
Yeah, and being part of the establishment, another pro is that he's being protected legally as well, because one of the big cons is in 2020, after the election, they did a poll where they said if you knew about Hunter Biden's laptop, would that have made a difference in your vote? And I think it was like 16% of Biden voters said that they would have switched their vote if they knew about Hunter Biden's laptop beforehand, from Biden to Trump. And that would have been the election. Donald Trump would have won, and it probably wouldn't have even been close. So, we talk a lot about the 2020 election being stolen. But to me, that was really where it was stolen, was the mainstream media interfering with the election and saying, oh no, this is Russian disinformation. And then turns out after the election, no, it wasn't Russian disinformation. It's a fact. So he's obviously being protected legally as well. And I think that's going to really hurt him, especially if Trump is the nominee, because even though Joe Biden will be able to come at him about his indictments and everything, Donald Trump could turn around and say, well, you should be the one that's being indicted. You should be the one facing possible prison time because of all this crap that you've done. So, it's going to be tough for Joe Biden to get reelected in a fair election, in my opinion.
Well, listen, Joseph, even if there was no Hunter Biden laptop and no Hunter Biden indictment, right? Don't you think the economy, right, inflation, those things are going to hurt Biden on the ballot?
I mean, the problem is that we haven't really seen inflation a lot over the last couple months, at least in my opinion. It hasn't been in the news cycle a whole lot. The cost of my groceries have gone down. Just 5 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, the cost of my eggs were about $10. They've now gone back down to about $4.50. Still, on the higher end, but it's about a $5 drop. And you're not really hearing a whole lot about it in the news. Whether or not that's because of everything going on with Trump and the indictments and everything remains to be seen. But it hasn't really been in the news cycle a whole lot lately. So voters have that sort of I guess you call it like 15-second memory, where if it hasn't been relevant in the last couple weeks, they kind of sort of forget about it a little bit. So we'll see what happens down the line. But he has a lot of stuff that's working against him. His attack on the Second Amendment. He's really pushing the whole trans stuff, and is surrounding himself with a lot of this craziness. So.
I, I actually think they had a pride event at the White House, and there was a trans
Yeah.
who was basically naked on the White House.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start seeing more of that as we get closer to election time.
And just yeah, and I don't think. Yeah, and that's what I don't know what sort of thinking that they have around this, because even a lot of the gay people and a lot of people that support gay pride and all that stuff, a lot of them don't agree with these trans people and them going on the White House front lawn and flashing people. So I don't know where they think that's going to help them, unless their plan is to drive out the 9% of people that identify as LGBTQ plus. It's a really weird strategy, in my opinion.
What about Marianne Williamson? Well, I'll tell you this. I think a pro is that she ran before, right? So she lost
Right.
against Joe Biden, and every time I think that you go out and set yourself with an objective and you fail, you then do an analysis of like, okay, what did we do wrong and what can we do better? So hopefully she's learned from that, and she'll be better this time. Campaigning against Joe Biden. Again,
Yeah.
I want to point out another unflattering picture, and this is, of course, on purpose from NBC News.
Yeah. The biggest problem with Marianne Williamson is that she's viewed as nuts. You know, whether or not she actually is or not, I don't know. Not my business. But she is viewed and is portrayed as a Looney Tune, so to speak. She's really into stargazing and like astrology and all this different stuff. So I think that really hurts her. And then in the general election, I understand a lot of people support cannabis. I don't know how many people would support legalizing psychedelics at this point for recreational use. I know they've done it in Colorado and in Oakland, in I think Oregon as well. But I don't know as far as like the entire country, if the entire country is really in favor of that. So, but yeah, she's really portrayed by the media as someone that's a bit loony.
Yeah, she's definitely out there, but at least she's there. Joe Biden's not even there, so
Yeah,
she's got a leg up on that.
yeah,
And I guess last but not least is Bobby Kennedy Jr.
mm,
What, as far as pros, you could say the name recognition from the Kennedys,
right.
right? He I guess he appeals to some libertarians or even conservatives. The fact that he's going up against the Democrat establishment is
Yeah,
appealing. His uncle was president and assassinated, and his father was surely going to be president and assassinated.
mm.
What are his cons?
Well, I think he has a couple of really big cons. His past comments, on the climate, he was a climate change extremist. And then his past comments about the NRA as well and gun owners, where he compared the NRA to terrorists and called them child killers. He said sort of he backed off apparently off these of these comments, but they're still out there. I don't know how you can trust someone that said this in 2018 that the NRA were terrorists and
But
child killers.
you mean Republicans, but
Right, right.
he could potentially win a Democratic primary.
Yeah, I'm talking about for the general. If you were to somehow win the primary, which I don't see happening because they're he's being protected by Joe Biden is being protected by the establishment. But if you were some way to win the primary in the general, I don't think that bodes well for him. Now for the primary, obviously doesn't bode well for him for the Democrats that he has been really outspoken about the vaccines and the lockdowns and stuff. That hurts him with the Democrats. So he has a few things that really hurts him with the Republicans and a few things that really hurt him with the Democrats. So and of course, like you mentioned, they're not going to let have any Democratic debates. So that's another issue for him is if he can't get up on the debate stage and whip the holy hell out of Joe Biden. A lot of his appeal have been to voters online on Twitter. A lot of it's on Twitter. So, unfortunately for him, there's a lot of voters that aren't on Twitter or don't spend a lot of time on Twitter that he's not going to be able to reach without those debates.
Yeah, and I think he's gotten a lot of momentum with Joe Rogan has been kind of promoting him. So I wonder if that is the candidate that Joe Rogan will support in this election.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to mention too, that I find interesting is that he and Ron DeSantis apparently had a pretty good relationship, but apparently Trump has tried to connect with him, and he said absolutely not because there was some talk about Trump selecting him as VP if he didn't end up becoming the nominee for the Democratic Party. And he said absolutely not, that he would not run with Trump because of the vaccine and the lockdowns and stuff. So it's interesting. I personally, in my opinion, in my view, think that he's only running to try to pull support from Republican candidates. But that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, that was actually Roger Stone, I think, is who threw that whole theory
Yeah.
on into the map that somehow Trump would in the convention call to suspend the rules, I guess, of the convention and nominate RFK Jr. to help him bolster his platform because of the whole vaccine issue. There's some people who I guess were turned off with some of the Republican candidates' response to vaccines, and they seem to really like RFK Jr. So
Yeah.
Well, there you got it, folks. It's 13 Republican candidates and 3 Democratic candidates. Well, we know that the Democratic Party is the undemocratic party because they will not host debates. They are protecting Joe Biden to make sure that he is the nominee. They do not want Democrats across America to decide who is the best candidate for them. They are going to decide for you. On the Republican side, there will certainly be debates. If is there anyone out there that you would say, hey, you would be looking forward for them to maybe jump in the ring and maybe even like some of these candidates are going for trying to be a vice president or a cabinet position. Is there anyone else out there that you think maybe should throw their head in the ring?
No, I'm personally already exhausted thinking about the debates and how many people might be up there. So I'm personally just already exhausted with how many candidates that we have. I know there was talk about Kristi Noem possibly getting in and a few others. But I think at this point too, it's kind of a little late anyway. They need to get 40. I think it's 40,000 unique donors. To contribute to their campaign. And I just think at this point there's too many people in the field, and it's too late for someone else to jump in that doesn't already have a ton of name recognition. And I don't know who's left that would have enough name recognition to shoot up to like third or fourth in the polls. to sort of grab that attention and get those donors. So I'm personally exhausted of all these candidates. I really hope, in my opinion, I really hope that on the debate stage there's not a full 13 candidates. I would rather keep it at max 10 candidates. Otherwise, it just gets so messy. I don't know if you remember in 2016, we had like 20 plus candidates. They had to split the debates in two. You had the lower candidates that weren't polling above like 3% or something, and then you had the rest on the main debate stage. That was freaking exhausting. So I don't want to have to deal with that again.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I know you said your pick was DeSantis. I'm sticking with my pick with President Trump. We're gonna see who comes out on top, and hopefully, whoever it's got to be a Republican.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's one thing I'll just touch on real quick is even though I'm supporting DeSantis for president right now, you and I are good friends. I've fully you have my support in pretty much anything, and we will always keep our opinions respectful. And I hope I'm pushing that everybody else does as well, and we secure the presidency in the general election. No matter who the Republican is.
Absolutely. Anything else we got for the show, or is that it for the night?
I think that's it for me.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next time. God bless you.
God bless. Have a good night.